Good evening. My name is Danny Leroy. Welcome to the first University of Lethbridge Agri-Food Summer Series conversation. These monthly webcasts bring producers and researchers together to discuss a pressing issue in agriculture and agri-food. Before the end of the program, there'll be time for your questions and answers. This webcast is sponsored by the South Grow Regional Initiative, 24 South Central Alberta communities working together to achieve prosperity, and by Alberta Southwest, a collaboration of 15 vibrant rural communities supporting local businesses and attracting new enterprises. Today's topic is, can we save the planet by directing cattle feed to people? Celebrities, those in urban media, and even some researchers tell us about the need to eat less beef to save the planet. Bovines pollute the air with their methane-rich burps. Not only are cattle eating our food, but they are also using land that could be used to grow human food on. Consider, to create 1 pound of steak, a steer needs to eat about 7 pounds of grain. Billions more humans could be fed if people just ate the stuff fed to cattle and other livestock. About 3/4 of all the agricultural land in the world is used for livestock. And it's estimated that the livestock sector accounts for 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. A solution to climate change appears to be to eat less meat, and this could be realized today. But is this the true, full story? To paraphrase John Kennedy, the great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. We often have the tendency to hold fast to cliches, enjoying the comfort of opinion without the effort of critical thought. To give us some critical food for thought about cattle feeding, I'm joined in conversation with Dr. Kim Stanford of the University of Lethbridge and Mr. Leighton Kolk of Kolk Farms in Iron Springs. Dr. Stanford was raised on her family farm in Spring Coulee, Alberta. She completed a PhD at the University of Alberta in meat science before becoming a research scientist with Alberta Agriculture. Recently, Dr. Stanford accepted a 3-year research position at the University of Lethbridge, focused on the food and feed-borne pathogens of beef cattle. Leighton Kolk has been in the business of agriculture for 34 years, growing crops and raising livestock in Iron Springs, Alberta. Leighton, along with his wife and 3 adult children, own and operate Kolk Farms Limited, which is focused on finishing cattle, raising irrigated crops, selling cereal seeds, and striving for efficiencies and sustainability. Let's begin the conversation this evening with Dr. Stanford. Dr. Stanford, can we save the planet by directing cattle feed to people?
It's not that easy, Danny. The big issue that needs to be considered is what cattle actually eat. And not all of the, actually very little, less 80% of the feed that cattle eat is not food for humans, or even that humans would consider eating. That's the big thing. So there's a lot of land being used for livestock production, but a lot of that land is marginal farmland where it's not possible to grow crops. So in a lot of ways, in my opinion, cattle are really excellent nutrient recyclers. They take some waste products that from human food production and upcycle that to really high quality protein that people can use. It's not that a lot of people would want to go out and try to graze a field of grass. You're not going to get much nutrition as people. We lack the rumen microbes that are able to digest the high fiber grasses and other high fibrous feeds. So yeah, it sounds easy. It sounds that we should just be able to save all the grain that's being fed to cattle and feed it to humans. But even the grain that's being fed to cattle, it is feed grain. It's grain that doesn't make the quality standards to go into human food production. That's probably enough for me for a little.
Sorry, Leighton, would you like to chime in?
Well, sure. I think Kim made a good introduction to it, and I will try not to duplicate what she's talked about. But you know, there's some things that we do as a cattle feeding operation that that I guess could also support what Kim says as far as what we use to produce a pound of beef or a kilogram of beef is often nothing that remotely resembles something the average person would want to eat. And I'll give you some specifics, and then we can maybe talk bigger picture after that. But you know, we feed here. We feed cheese whey, so that's a product that comes from a cheese plant. Humans, I love cheese, and it's a fantastic thing on our plate. But there's a bunch of byproducts that come from the production of cheese that can only go to one other place other than livestock, and that would be the dump or the sewer. Or so we feed cheese whey to our cattle. We feed dried distiller grains, which is a byproduct of the ethanol business. So they cook corn, turn it into alcohol. Alcohol goes into your gas tank to run your car. The byproduct is this corn mash called dried distiller grains. It goes into our cattle. It's high in protein, high in fat, but has no human not usable by humans. Sprouted wheat, discolored durum, rejected malt barley, potatoes that are too small, too big, too soft, too discolored, sugar beets. We're feeding sugar beets right now that couldn't make it through the plant because of harvest problems last fall and storage problems over the winter. It was too warm, then cold, then too warm. Would have been thrown all in either in the dump or in the landfill or made into some kind of compost. GSPs, grain screening. So much of the grain we export, Canada produces about 50% more grain than we can use here, probably 60%. And so guess where that goes? That goes to Japan, China, Korea, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia. Anyways, this product goes to the ports in Vancouver or in Churchill or in Guelph, Thunder Bay, to get loaded onto ships to cross the ocean. However, they don't want the screenings, the shell of the grain, the odd grasshopper that goes along with that load of grain, all these kind of weed seeds, all these byproducts, they all get cleaned out, turned into a grain screening pellet, they call it, and it comes back, and guess where it goes? Into our cow feed. Burnt canola, we're feeding 5% burnt canola or 6% burnt canola currently. We've fed French fries in the past. We've fed discarded jelly beans in the past. We do currently feed higher fusarium grains that humans can't use and will get rejected from mills. So this is just giving you a flavor of when we make up a ration for our animals to grow a pound of beef, about 65% of that is products that will never be used by humans, but the animal, the cow especially, being a fantastic garburator with a rumen as big as a whiskey barrel, can take that stuff, gurgle it, chew its cud, make it go round and round, bubble it, digest it, and turn it into tasty beef. So we're taking product that can't turn into anything except possible compost or our landfill, and we're turning into something that many of us would enjoy on our barbecue.
Thank goodness for ruminants. Hey, and it's just not cattle, right? So it's sheep, goats, the whole litany of ruminants. These animals are able to make use of plant matter that's not accessible to humans.
It's cellulose. Yeah.
Exactly, and this seems to be something that's perhaps overlooked by some groups. Is that?
Yeah, I would say that's quite fair, Danny. It's ignored. It's just assumed that cattle are eating straight soybean meal that should be going into tofu and your tofurkey or whatever it is. And, tofurkey, yes. And so we're threatening the supply of tofu by feeding cattle, but that's not the case. Even like in Canada, we're feeding canola meal, and canola is being grown as an oil seed for the oil. So for the oil to fry your French fries and do all that kind of your home cooking. But the canola meal itself, there aren't humans eating. It's high in protein. It's a fabulous feed, but there's not humans eating it. Actually, when I first started my master's degree up at so I'm dating myself. I'm older than dirt, but this would be in the 1980s. And right then, when I was just starting, they were just finishing. There were a whole, lots of different graduate students working with poultry and pigs, not so much cattle. That had already been figured out early that cattle had no problem with canola meal. But the question was how much canola meal could be fed to poultry and could be fed to pigs, because it's higher in fiber and it has a kind of a funny taste that pigs don't like it like too much. They have to adapt to it. But so those were the research projects when I was just starting out, and that's that now you don't even think about canola meal as being a byproduct. It's a mainstream feed, and it's all livestock are using it, and it supports the canola crushing industry, because if they couldn't sell this their canola meal to livestock producers, then it's a much less viable industry. And I've heard that canola crusher, they're the biggest employer in Lethbridge. So yay livestock who to buy the canola meal and keeps the wheels rolling on some very big companies.
Leighton, from a practical point of view, you've been in the cattle business for 34 years. Could you comment a little bit on how important it is for feeders to make profitable use of what would be considered by some perhaps as being a waste product, and finding a useful end use for that in a feed ration? Like, this is something that perhaps at the outset of your career in agriculture wasn't as prevalent as it is today. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. No, Danny, I think that's correct. One thing that I think helps us visualize kind of the value of what livestock does in other circles other than food production, so the consumer's plate, is all feed grain in Canada is actually priced, or I shouldn't say in Canada, Ontario, Ontario West. All barley and feed wheat is priced basis Southern Alberta, so basis Lethbridge. And the significant thing about that, if you think about it, is so there's farmers from Manitoba to the Fraser Valley, BC, that are growing all kinds of crops. And when they want to market that crop, the value is basis Lethbridge, Alberta, or Southern Alberta. And the reason is Southern Alberta is the cattle feeding center of Canada. It's the largest producer of products. So our largest producer of beef in Canada. But Alberta,
about 70%, eh?
Yeah, but 70% of Canada's beef is produced in Alberta. Of that, about 75% of that is in Southern Alberta. So what it does tell you is every crop that gets grown has probably an intended purpose. So canola for canola oil, as Kim said, malt barley for beer, durum for spaghetti, pastas, whatever, soft wheat, hard red for millers, bread, flour, soybeans for so all these crops have a purpose. However, the farming business is a challenging business, and just because you intend to grow a crop for a purpose doesn't mean that that's what it gets. Its ultimate end use is because of weather, insects, disease, challenges, whatever. So much of that product guns for this market lands in this market, and without without livestock, there would be a lot less sustainability in all of agriculture, because discarded, discounted, sprouted, heated, off-grade crops would have nowhere to go, would have no value, or very little value. Now they have big value, which makes a farmer more sustainable, makes him have more sustainable practices. So
it sounds like a win-win, Leighton.
If you looked at prices of, say, land, prices of grain, prices, the further away you get from the intensive livestock center, the lower the price goes. So it kind of tells you, kind of like the highest priced houses are Toronto and Vancouver, because everybody wants to live there, I guess, except me. But so that's why the prices are so high. There's a demand there. Well, the same thing is kind of the opposite math for things like crops and agricultural commodities.
Kim, you've done some research on things like ergot, which makes of course grain unsuitable for human consumption, and it does create some challenges. Would you take a moment to describe some of that, please?
Yeah, I could probably talk for hours on ergot. Everybody probably get.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay, so ergot's it's a fungus, and the fungus replaces. You can see from the little picture on the screen there. So the purplish things are called ergot bodies that the fungus makes, and those are full of a bunch of alkaloid poisons that they will affect people, can kill people, and they're not good for livestock either. But what we're trying to do is figure out some fairly simple methods. Is it possible to make the ergot alkaloids less toxic by just some things like heating the ergot or just pelleting it? Also, there's heat and pressure in pelleting. So we've got a animal feeding study is planned, hopefully should be starting this fall. Just getting everything lined up for that with the cooperation of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada here in Lethbridge. And we're trying to set the allowable limits for ergot alkaloids, like just do some more research to try to figure out what those are, because there's the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they have laws that say this is how much ergot alkaloids are allowed, but they're opening those up for review. And so our work is to try to help provide some good science to help establish what the limits should be, looking at both performance and welfare of the animals, as ergot can cause a few pretty nasty side effects to cattle, such as lameness, pneumonia, abortions, hoof falling off, necrosis of the ears and tails, and a lot of nice things, and heat stress also. It's causing a bunch of stuff. So we're working on that, and we want to do this because the other so if a farmer has grain that's got ergot contamination, their choice are A, set it on fire, which is not a good thing, or B, dig a big hole and put it in there and try to bury it. But then, like the ergots, you want to get it off your farm. You don't want to, because it will keep reestablishing and growing, and you'll have continual ergot problems. So we want to be able to feed it to livestock just to get rid of it, but we want to know how much we can feed without causing problems for the livestock. That's probably enough about ergot.
Thank you. This leads into a question, I think, for Leighton. How challenging is it to incorporate different byproducts of production from other lines into a livestock ration? Like you were describing, you're taking, sometimes it's French fries and sometimes it's sugar beets, sprouted grains. And you have a lot of experience with this. Could you describe for our viewers here what's all involved with incorporating those things into a profitable ration?
Probably the first thing that's involved is some really fantastic engaged staff for me. We probably couldn't do as good a job as we do of utilizing some feedstuffs if we didn't have very versatile, engaged, actually very well educated people that understand nutrition, understand dry matter, moisture levels, the energy density, and how to process stuff. So I would take a thing like a sugar beet. We have to put our heads together with our staff here to say, okay, we got a sugar beet. You can imagine a sugar beet is the size of anything from a softball up to the size of a small football. They're pretty big, and a cow's throat is definitely bigger than yours or mine, but it's still got a limit. So we have to we kind of put our heads together. It's like, okay, we can take these beets. They're high in sugars. They're high in energy. We ran it through a nutrient profile, figured out how many calories is there that we can feed to an animal each day without messing up his or her rumen, and without taking the energy levels or the fiber levels too far. So a bunch of smart things have to happen on our side. Then we decide, okay, how are we going to process it? Also, once we've decided we have to grind it because it's too big, we have to grind it into this smaller size product. But then it's too wet and the water will start running, and we'll lose all the sugars and the juices because they'll start running down the sidewalk or the floor of the silage pit. So we took screenings. You can see little bits of screenings. So we took weed seeds and cracked, kind of poor quality grains, took and mixed that through a stump grinder, a great big stump grinder that can grind stumps as big as an elephant's leg. And we would dump buckets of this into the stump grinder and or into this together, and it would dry it process it, then we could pile it and store it, and we're feeding it today. We did this all back in October when we had to harvest. So, but then without computers, this would be a real son of a gun. So there's an onboard in the feed truck you're looking at. If you can see the screen, there's a little scale up in the top corner of that white box, but inside there's an onboard touchscreen computer, which is telling us, okay, we're going to put in 5% of this product, 12%, so 5% of a mineral mix. We're going to put in 8% of ground beets. We're going to put in 9% of dried distillers. We're going to put in, so each and every ingredient. And when we go to add one of these ingredients, because they're available, or have to take them out because they're no longer available, we need to change that ration. Thankfully, with wireless technology, one of the people in my main office can change that ration and wirelessly fire it out to any of our yards. We have 3 yards and miles apart, and it's wirelessly the new cake mix, because we tell them they're bakers and chefs here. The new cake mix is in the computer when he jumps back in there, and the next batch he makes will now be 0% French fries, for instance, because we don't have any French fries or whatever. So without computers, it'd be just, boy, that'd be a challenge. Or we wouldn't be able to be as sustainable as we are by getting high performance while feeding all these different products.
You wouldn't have the information needed and accessible
Correct.
to make the ration that you want. Right?
Yeah.
Excellent. On the topic of food here, it's getting near supper time. It's almost 6 o'clock. Perhaps we can move to the Q&A session before signing off. I have a question here that was submitted. And for those of you that are on the line, if you have some questions, feel free to type them and send them, and I'll forward them to our panelists in the order in which they come in. Brandy Lee asks, Leighton mentioned that crops such as malt barley are sometimes rejected. How does something end up being rejected and directed to cattle feed? How does that process work, Leighton?
There's a number of specific criteria that the maltster will want. They'll want a falling number, a protein number, a color. So they'll bring a sample of their bin, of their crop, to the broker or whoever, they may not send it to China, but the malt is intended for China, for a brewer there, but they'll have an agent here. He or she will look at it and say, well, it's discolored, or the protein's too high, or the protein's too low, or the plumpness, bushel weight is not right. So they assess it and say, sorry, this doesn't make the grade. It won't make good beer. It will have a discolored look, whatever. Won't make the grade. The farmer goes back and scratches his head and then picks up the phone and starts phoning a feed broker instead.
Thank you very much. Kim, this one might be suited for you. Luella asks, are there efforts to help cattle ranchers in countries where forests and rainforests are being cut down for cattle ranching?
I would say that cattle are kind of being used to help clear off after the forest has been cut down. They put cattle onto the forest, like what's left, just to kind of clear it up so that then they can plant crops on it, would be the ultimate objective. So the cattle are like the idiots that are there with the smoking gun after somebody got murdered. So they're there holding the gun, and so the next group of people come in, they say, oh my God, look at those cattle. They've obviously cleared off this forest to run cattle. But I think they're just using the cattle as a tool to help, like, eat some of the weeds and break things up. So the objective, when I've been in Brazil, I've seen fantastic soybean fields as far as the eye can see of land that used to be forested, and it's not. You don't see cattle on those fields. It's always show me the money, and there's more money to be made from growing soybeans than I won't pin Leighton to that, but there's a higher margin in that than there is feeding livestock or grazing livestock, definitely.
Right. Thank you. Here's another good question. Somebody's commenting on the wonders of ruminants. A great way to use these byproducts, put them through a ruminant. So where do some fast food places get all their grass-fed critters?
Do you want to go with that, Leighton, or should I?
So if we think about some of the fast food places, let's take McDonald's as example, Leighton. Where does the beef come for McDonald's hamburgers?
And McDonald's actually doesn't make a grass-fed claim. They have a sustainability claim.
Right.
So actually,
and it's all Canadian.
It's 100% Canadian. It's also 100% beef, contrary to many myths out there. And I've seen the patty plant in Edmonton,
Sherwood Park,
St. Albert,
Spruce Grove.
And
it's pretty amazing. The quality control is unreal. But anyways, I get off topic. So A&W, I think, has a
grass-fed claim.
Grass-fed. And so when you talk grass-fed, there's I guess I'd say there's a couple of main ways you get grass-fed. One is through cow cull, so cow slaughter, so not finished animals that are fed in a feedlot. These are cows that are walking on pastures, on leased land, and they're no longer able to have another calf next year. They're no longer they're no longer reproductive. They may be, for whatever reason, maybe they're just a bad mother, whatever. Anyways, these things, so they become part of the packing. They go into the packing process, and because they are grass fed, not fed any grain, they're considered grass fed. There is one other definition that kind of the animals have access to grass. They may also have access to grain, but it becomes maybe a little bit of a marketing ploy more so than.
Right. Here's that's a great way to lead into this question from Lorraine. She says, as I toil away pushing my lawnmower, I often think how advantageous it would be to use the grass clippings for animal consumption. What a waste. Is there some way we could coordinate picking up bags of grass in the city to deliver to farmers? So this is interesting, right? So you operate, Leighton, just outside of Lethbridge here. There's 100,000 people live in Lethbridge. Many of them have lawns. You're making use of byproducts from other agri-food enterprises in your ration. Why isn't there a market for grass clippings?
Wow.
I can answer that one.
Okay, go ahead.
You'd have to get everyone to promise not to put weed and feed on their lawn. Like people are using too many herbicides. So as long as you're growing a nice crop of dandelions with your grass and not using any other sort of herbicides, it would be fine. But if people are wanting the pristine golf green super lawn, that's going to cause problems for the cattle. So I don't think there's a easy way you can't separate out different grass based on what's in it. So it would be fantastic. I think that would be lovely if people would not use so many herbicides on their lawns.
Excellent answer. And maybe this will be the last one we'll end off on tonight, this question here. It's from David Hill. He asks, I've eaten beef and some great steaks in lots of places around the world. What is it about Southern Alberta beef that puts it at the top of the taste profile? What do we do so well here that can't be duplicated elsewhere?
Sunshine and smiles. It's the smiles and the, the happy attitude of cows and people that, but no, it definitely is. The climate is definitely part of the whole process. We have a fairly dry, mild climate. We don't have near the parasites that you would in deep southern states or into Central America. We don't have heat stress near as much. We have ways to deal with the cold stress. We have well-balanced rations and a food grade system that's second to none. So our grading system has grades. So if you want a really marbled steak, you buy a choice. If you want a very good marbled steak, you buy a AAA, a AA, a single A, lean. You have all those choices, and we have fairly tight specs which reward doing a good job and discount for not doing a good job, better than probably many places that produce beef in the world.
There is a very strong connection in terms of the information signals that go back to producers, depending on the pattern of the consumption of final consumers, right?
Can I add in one thing too? I think it's the barley. The barley gives a really nice white fat and it just tastes great compared to the crapiola corn-fed beef that does appear on some U.S. plates.
Okay, Kim. Well,
yeah, I'm not going to be making any friends, but I've only got a 3-year contract.
You're stirring a big cauldron here.
They can fire me. It's okay.
Okay, we've gone a little over time. First of all, before signing off, I want to thank all the people who attended this webinar live. It was wonderful having you this evening with us, and I hope you got something out of the conversation among our panelists. I want to thank our sponsors, South Grow Regional Initiative, 24 South Central Alberta's communities working together to achieve prosperity, and by Alberta Southwest, a collaboration of 15 vibrant rural communities supporting local business and attracting new enterprises. And stay tuned for our next conversation on Tuesday, July 27th, on the topic of crops and irrigation, featuring Dr. Tom Jensen from the University of Lethbridge and Autumn Barnes, who's an agronomy specialist with the Canola Council of Canada. Thank you again to Kim for your time and insight. Leighton, your time and insight. Both these people are friends of mine. I've known them a long time. Wonderful to spend some time with you this evening. And I look forward to seeing people on the webcast a month from now. Have a good night. Thank you. Keep well and keep thinking critically.
Thanks a lot, Danny.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
Kim.
Danny. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Good talking with you all.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it too.